The Audacity podcast is a proud member of the Noodle Mix network at Noodle.mx and is sponsored by me through djosephdesign.com. If you need a website design, web hosting, presentation design, maybe cover art for your podcast, please contact me. Feedback at Noodle.mx, and I can set you up with pretty much whatever your needs are. Website design, presentation design, print design, cover art design. I can help you start a podcast. Please contact me and let me know. I will give you 10% off your first invoice if you mention the podcast. Feedback at Noodle.mx. Welcome to the Audacity to Podcast, Episode 4, Live Podcasting, Q&A. Welcome back to the Audacity to Podcast. Do you have what it takes to podcast? Do you have the audacity to podcast? I'm your host, Daniel Lewis, also known as the Ramen Noodle, on Twitter as the Ramen Noodle, and also the host of TheRamenNoodle.com, which is another podcast where it's seasoning packets of comedy to flavor your day. Welcome to all of our new subscribers. The number just keeps going up and up. I am excited to see that. It is really just exciting to see this podcast getting out to so many people, because I look forward to helping so many people with my goal, not my personal goal, but it's my goal to help you. That is giving you the guts and teaching you the tools to podcast successfully. I want you to podcast with that pod, that passion, that organization, and that dialogue. That's the pod of podcasting. If you need more information about that, go back to episode 1, which you can get at theaudacitytopodcast.com/1. That's the number 1. This week's show is a little bit different from the previous shows we've done. Now, someone recently emailed me and pointed out that saying, you talk about Audacity all the time, but you haven't told us anything about Audacity yet. And that's true. I will fix that next week. But this week's show is actually pre-recorded. It's not live, unfortunately, but it is pre-recorded, and it was recorded at the time live. What you're about to hear is a session that I hosted, a panel discussion at PodCamp Ohio, which was in Columbus earlier this year on June 19 of 2010. This is where we had this room at podcasting at PodCamp Ohio, where we had several live podcasts within this room. We had Cliff Ravenscraft and Eric Fisher with Social Media Serenity, which you can get over at socialmediaserenity.com. Friends of mine, good friends, good guys. We also had the Ramen Noodle there doing a live show. That's me and my co-host, Jeremy. And you can hear our episodes over at TheRamenNoodle.com, or they're also on Noodle.mx, since it's all part of the Noodle Mix network. And also, we had the iPad show was showing and recorded there. So we had these different podcasters there podcasting live. They recorded a regular show just like they normally would, but they did it in front of a live audience, and they broadcasted live to the internet. And we used multiple technologies to do this, and each of us had different workflows for how we preferred to do our live shows. So what we did is, at the end of the day, and I mean that literally. I hate that phrase, the figurative phrase, but I mean this one literally. At the literal end of the day, after these several live podcasts that we had a panel that got together of the live podcasters who answered questions and explained a little bit of our equipment, of our setup, of our workflows that we used in order to make live podcasting happen, and some of the decisions behind that, like why do we live podcast, and what are the websites that we use, what kind of microphones do we use, how do we mix it all live and post things so quickly up to the internet after it's recorded, all of this kind of stuff. So what you're about to hear, Cliff Ravenscraft wasn't able to join us because he had another session that the people just were desperately hungry for information. So I tried to represent Cliff's workflow a little bit when I described some of the technology that he uses that's different than what you hear from us. So you'll also hear me from here, the Noodle Mix Network, and my primary podcast, the Ramen Noodle. That's my flagship podcast, or maybe it's not anymore now that the Audacity podcast is getting so popular. Hey, everybody, go over to theramennoodle.com and subscribe, please. It needs more subscribers now. It's getting kind of lonely being the flagship podcast. We also had some gentlemen from the iPad Show, which is over at iPadshow.com or the iPad Show. You can check the show notes for all of these links over at theaudacitypodcast.com/4, the number 4. We also had a gentleman there from the iPad Possibilities Show, who is a guest co-host along with the iPad Show. So all of these guys that come from different video podcasting backgrounds and have a different workflow in that sense. And then I'm an audio podcaster, and I'm also trying to represent Cliff Ravenscraft over at podcastanswerman.com and socialmediaserenity.com and gspn.tv and all sorts of other sites you can think of that are podcasting and social media services there. We all got together and we explained everything. Then near the end, we had some questions and answers. Now, you can't hear the questions, obviously, so I tried to repeat the questions so that you'll be able to hear them in this recording. So, you'll hear a lot of web addresses mentioned in this. Don't worry, you can go ahead and try and copy them down if you want to, but if you can't, go over to theaudacitypodcast.com/4 and you can get all of those show notes. But before we get into that, I've got something cool to tell you about. The Audacity to Podcast is sponsored by Citrix. Citrix makes a cool product. Now, you're going to hear in this discussion a lot of talk about the iPad. The iPad is cool. The iPad is not a Windows computer and it's not a Mac. What are you going to do? I've got good news for you. Citrix, makers of GoToMeeting, have come out with a new update to their products. When you have GoToMeeting, you can attend online meetings on the go at a cafe or hotel or at a conference or whatever. And it's super easy. Just download GoToMeeting app, join the sessions on your iPad, and it's working in an instant. It's an awesome way to be able to attend meetings. Hey, if you got an iPad through 3G, that means you could attend an online meeting from anywhere, like a beach or a hotel. But let's go back to the beach. Attend a meeting, online meeting from the beach on your iPad. That's pretty cool. My listeners can try out GoToMeeting free for 30 days. For the special offer, you must visit gotomeeting.com/techpodcasts. That's gotomeeting.com/techpodcasts for your free 30-day trial. And now, let's hear this discussion from PodCamp Ohio.
Okay.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining us. And except for Cliff, which I know some of his setup, we'll talk about some of the ways that we've done live podcasts and some of the things that we found effective, found not effective, and certain workflows that we have. So you guys podcasted earlier.
Yes, we did.
PodCamp Ohio. So why don't you tell us about how you've got your things set up?
Well, for our podcast, we do it almost completely live. So everything is kind of, our idea is we record and then as little editing as possible is what we shoot for, because editing can take up a lot of time. Once you start digging into the audio or video file, you keep going and cutting and cutting and cutting. So it's a good practice to kind of just hone your skills as a person on microphone or in front of a camera, instead of trying to say, oh, we'll just fix that at the end, because it just complicates the audio file, and unless you're really good at editing, it can be done badly, or it's just, you can do it well, and a lot of people I know like to edit everything out of their show, but it's also it makes the production workflow a lot easier to just try and do it in one take.
So you've got the iPad show, which, by the way, we didn't even introduce ourselves. Not everybody knows. I'm Daniel Lewis, also known as the Ramen Noodle. That's my primary flagship podcast. And you guys introduce yourselves.
I'm Tim Chatton of the iPad Possibilities podcast.
Yep, I'm Dave Buchanan of the iPad show and the Android app show, the Android tech show, the app show, the Coefficient Media podcast.
You do some shows, all right.
You do a lot, yes.
Coefficient Media.
And I'm Steve Bostador from the iPad show and the app show.
Cool. So, Dave, do you also do video podcasts then?
Yeah, so we primarily started out as an audio podcast, and we had just put up a camera to stream our podcast as we were doing it on Ustream, and that seemed to work pretty well. We had 10, 20 people per show watch live, which was cool. And then the audio was really what we focused on. And recently, in the past couple months, we bought a video mixer and a couple good cameras and lights and all the fancy set stuff. And we started doing video, and we're extremely surprised with that. In the past couple months, we've had like over 2.5 million downloads of the video thing, which is blown up our servers and our listings in iTunes. So it was a big surprise to see people wanting the video so much more than the audio.
Really? And so is that for which show? Is that
That's for the iPad show.
Okay.
Yeah, we were lucky enough to be producing the right show at the right time with the right name, and having honed our skills with the other shows we'd done, it was a perfect opportunity for us to ride that into the #1 spot on iTunes.
Awesome. Cool. And so you mix everything real time. Like, what's some of the equipment, actual models and different equipment that you use?
So we had a board that was just like this. It was a Behringer 12-channel mixer. And that was good until we went to PodCamp last year and it broke. It got a line hum noise. And I won't touch that one. But we used that, and it worked pretty well. But then we started doing a couple other shows where we had 4 people in the studio, or we needed 5 microphones or something. We had just grown past what our board was. So we got a 18-channel Alesis digital mixer. And what was nice about that is it gives us the opportunity to record 18 channels independently. So if we do have somebody on Skype and their audio is really bad, we could cut out the spaces. If we want to go in and edit, we could cut out the spaces that they're not talking in to make the audio better, or just kind of make sure all the levels are better later. So that's a 18-channel Alesis digital mixer, and it's an amazing price. I mean, it's still $500, but to get an 18-channel mixer, that's the best way to get that many channels at once.
Okay. Now, from a website perspective, when you guys record a podcast live, and you're streaming live, you said. Do you have the Ustream player embedded on your site?
Yeah, we have the Ustream player and chat room embedded on the site.
Okay.
It's been a little frustrating recently with Ustream adding a bunch of different ads to the live stream. So we're looking at switching or doing something. We use Ustream now. I've used Livestream in the past. The one thing that's keeping us on Ustream is they have like a mobile version of it. So you can either watch in the Ustream app on your phone, or you can actually click a link on our website and it streams to phones on the website, even phones that don't support Flash.
Nice. And what chat room are you using?
We're just using the Ustream one right now. It would be nice to have our own dedicated chat room, but really the live show is only a fraction of what the downloaded show is. So It's nice to be able to have the involvement of the chat room in there. But the main reason that we do a live show is just for the feel of a live show. It keeps you on your toes, and it keeps the show moving. We don't get bogged down on one topic for too long because we know that there's a couple people in the chat room or in the live stream. It just gives it an immediacy that we like.
I often get distracted.
Yeah, what?
I'll look at the chat room and someone will start talking about something, and then I'll just kind of inject it into the conversation at an inappropriate time. So I have to kind of not
I'm
look
the
away.
same way. If I look at the chat room during a live show and I'm talking, sometimes I'll just lose my train of thought when I'm talking.
Right.
So that's kind of a danger there.
J1F in the chat room says you have something in your cheek, Dave.
He does? Oh, that was a joke.
Or if someone said the stream isn't coming up properly, and it's because their laptop doesn't have the good Wi-Fi connection or something crazy.
Yeah.
So then,
Tim.
Yes, Tim. Yes.
Tim, yeah, forgot your name. Sorry. What do you do with your show? You've got the iPad.
I do 3 episodes a week. Each of them has a different kind of format. The Sunday night show is a live show, and then Wednesday's kind of the studio show, like I like to call it, and then Friday is the weekly thought show, kind of a shorter length, just a thought I have, something really quick. I like to do just kind of a mixture of different formats. And with the live show, it's at 9:30 p.m. Every Sunday night, and I've got a co-host, sometimes more than one, and we do that all through Ustream. And a couple of people show up to watch every Sunday night. More of it's through downloads, as most people have.
How do you bring your co-host into the show?
I use Skype primarily for that. I haven't been able to figure out the video end with getting a co-host on with Ustream. So for Ustream stuff, I've got video of myself, and then I have a IPVO POV2 webcam, which is a really great webcam. It was like $80 that comes with a stand that can zoom in on the iPad, so I can do really hands-on things without needing to do complicated things such as video out with jailbroken iPads and stuff. And it's getting pretty good results.
Yeah, the one secret to our show where we can bring in the iPads and guests from Skype is, much like the audio mixer here, we just got a video mixer that does 8 channels of video. It does 2 computer things. One of them is Skype, and then the other one is we switch between the iPads. So that has really helped the show. It was expensive. It's probably the most expensive piece of gear that we've bought, but it really took the show from just a one camera in a dorm room kind of feel to an actual studio feel.
So how much was it?
It was 2,500, 2,800.
Yikes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's effectively what people call a TriCaster, right?
It's like similar to a TriCaster, but it does not have a computer built into it. So we just take the video out of that into some other stuff. And because the TriCaster option was like 3 or 4 times more for how many channels we wanted.
Did you?
No, yeah, it just usually results in those really bad timed, uncomfortable close-ups. Usually, right when we're not expecting it, Dave will just flip it on me, and I'm like, oh,
your nose.
I know.
And one thing about, like, Steve has really helped out a lot because he kind of comes up with all the hacks on how to get stuff working. Like he has,
that's me. I come up with a hack.
Like
I come up with my duct tape and my.
Exactly. Like the little thing we have on the floor over here is like a VGA switcher, and that's what we use to bring in more channels of computers. And it's really cool to be inventive. Sometimes I just don't want to be hassled with it, and I'll pull out the credit card, which is bad.
Yeah.
Very bad.
A credit card fixes a lot of problems.
Yeah.
More than duct tape
It creates
does.
a lot more, though.
Yeah.
For my show, I don't do video podcasts. I do stream live video when I'm recording. And right now, the only show that's consistently recorded live is the Ramen Noodle. And I do that every Monday night at 8:30 Eastern Time 8 Eastern Time at theramenoodle.com/live, or eventually it'll be noodle.mx/live. And I use Ustream to convey the video, and then I use Chatango for the chat room because I don't like the Ustream chat room. It just works weird, and someone
Blocks
can be logged
URLs.
into Ustream, but if they want to use your chat room on your site, they have to log into Ustream again.
Yeah.
Which it's really weird like that. But I'm trying to move away from Chatango because it's Flash-based, and I want to be able to get away from Flash. And so I'm looking at some different things like Chatroll Turbo.264.com is one place. They have a iPad compatible chat room. It's really nice looking, but the free version only lets you have 10 people in a chat room maximum. The paid version for $9 a month lets you have 50 people in the chat room, and then there's a $19 plan that lets you have even more. And that's, at this time, that's just more than I want to spend. So I'm, for now, still looking.
One quick tip, I looked into, Levelator kind of publishes exactly what he does, and his chat setup is, I think, completely free, and I've integrated that onto my site. I use it with the live radio that's not really set up properly yet. But so there is some free stuff, and it's IRC based, so apps work with that and all sorts of stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, and that might be the way to go for that. Hardware-wise, I use a Behringer Xenyx 1204 mixer, and that's what I have here while we're recording. I have a Heil PR40, which is the one you're actually using, Dave.
So nice.
And these other Heil PR40s are from Cliff Ravenscraft of GSPN.TV, who is supposed to be here, but
he's across the way.
He's still talking to people, so he might not join us. And I go into a mixer, and instead of recording into my computer, I do use my computer for streaming. But I no longer record into my computer because I had an episode glitch on me. The first 15 minutes of an episode were completely unusable because I have a 4-year-old computer running Windows 7 with Audacity. So it's all of these conditions that were unique to me, and because of certain other stuff I was running at that time. So I decided after that I'd buy a recorder. So I have a Zoom H4n. And what I love about the Zoom H4n is that it records in 4 channels. And the reason I do that, this mixer, the 1204, any of the Behringer mixers that end with 4, can output 4 channels of audio. So this has the main mix, and then it has an alt 3/4 mix. So what I do is I have all of my microphones coming in through the main mix. And then I have my sound effects and music go in through the alternate mix. The reason I do that is I do a quick processing of my audio. I use a compressor afterward to kind of level or even out the volume of my recordings, especially since I've got a Heil PR40, nice microphone, and my co-host, Jeremy, who was in the Ramen Noodle earlier, just has a cheapy microphone. Eventually we'll upgrade him. So the sound levels are different, and because of the hardware is different.
Is that your way of making you sound better than him?
Yes, exactly.
Sometimes I think Dave tweaks up his little...
I do.
Yeah, he turns up the sound awesome filter on his mixer.
Yeah. I probably have
and he turns on the other guy mixer. Because I think he has it labeled that way on his mixer, me, the other guy. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I probably have the easiest or simplest setup. I don't deal with mixing boards yet, and they kind of scare me with all the wires and all that. So my setup's pretty simple. It's just a USB mic.
A really cool one.
Yeah, Blue Mic makes a great $100 on Amazon. Yeti Blue Mic. It's USB, so it's got 3 or 4 microphones inside this capsule, so you can have it set up for just podcasting mode where the front mics are turned on. And it also has open mode and interview mode. So it's got a lot of different presets on how you can actually record. And you can plug your headphones directly into the mic to hear what you're recording as you're doing it. And it works well on the iPad with the camera connection kit. And I can actually record shows on here now. So
awesome.
Very simple setup and works well for me.
So the reason I record in 4 channels is because I want to separate my voices and the audio, the sound effects and music. Because when you run sound effects or music through a compressor, like a dynamic compressor, Levelator, or Audacity has a fantastic dynamic compressor that apparently I'm the only one who uses it. It's called Chris's dynamic compressor. It's fantastic. Or Audition has its multi-band compressor. What it will do is if you have sound effects that fade in or fade out, a compressor will really mess that up because it hears the quiet part and it thinks, oh, I need to make that part quieter. And then when your music gets loud enough, it raises above this floor, and then the compressor will suddenly decide, this is valid audio, so I need to make this louder. So what you get is sometimes you get this in and out sort of sound, like on your sound as it's fading in, or sometimes you just get a weird jump in your audio. So I don't like to run filters on my sound effects or music, so that's why I record in 4 channels. And my setup on my mixer to do that is extremely complicated, sort of. Well, it is. But in order to get those 4 channels then to Ustream, I just tap into the headphone jack of my Zoom H4n, and that headphone jack then has everything mixed down, back down
cool.
to stereo. And I run that into my computer and broadcast through Ustream. And then I play sound effects while I'm recording, and I use Pod Producer to do that, which here at PodCamp Ohio, I have that up on the screen, showing that I've got these different buttons I could press to play different things and see information about my clips. And you guys, do you use iPads to do sound effects, or what?
We usually don't do too many sound effects. We just play it QuickTime files off the computer.
Okay.
Or make them with our mouths.
Yeah.
And mine's simple too. I don't try to do sound effects during the live show. I'll add those in post when I publish and all that kind of stuff. And then if I do voicemails, this worked well. I just had my USB mic, had the iPad with the voicemail, played it. It sounded great, and it worked well for the live show. So
Nice. And one thing what we do to get around the compression of the audio files is we use the effects out of our mixer and have all of our voice channels go through the effects out. We have a hardware compressor, and it compresses the signal live, and then it comes back into the mixer, and then we just leave the computer out of that, or we can turn it on or off.
So that's another one of those things of the credit card fixing the problem.
Well,
I might as well just stick my credit card in the mixer. And
luckily, that one I found at a pawn shop, so somebody else used their credit card. Yeah,
someone was selling a compressor limiter gate at a pawn shop.
A rack-mounted 2-channel compressor limiter gate.
I need to find out what pawn shops you shop at.
I'd like to know what truck that fell off of.
Yeah, it was nice.
I found it on the road.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, so why is it that you podcast live?
Well, we kind of talked a little bit about that, but we like the feel of a live show so that we don't get too bogged down. And it's just kind of a thing that we do to kind of hone our skills, because we want to continually push to be better entertainers or better people in general of speaking. So that's something that we try and do, and I don't know if it's succeeding for me, but...
Right. Well, sometimes it helps to see... Also, if we're falling down on a piece of technology or something, there's something that's at the tip of our tongue, someone in the chat room will blurt it out.
Yeah.
And so it's really helpful to make us sound smarter than we are.
So are you guys scheduled?
Yeah, loosely.
Do you say this time every week? You're gonna do it?
We aim for 3:30 every Sunday.
Okay.
yeah.
Doesn't quite work that way.
And Tim's
9:30 every Sunday night. And the reason I like to do live shows is I'm trying to build a community, and it's I think a lot easier if there's a place that, hey, you can join me, you can even call in if you want, and I do accept calls from other people on the show and all that. So it's for a sense of community is why I do it. Yeah.
And I also do it live, 8 o'clock every Monday night for the Ramen Noodle. The others I haven't figured out when I want to schedule them. But for me, the Ramen Noodle is my flagship podcast. It's been around. I started it in 2007. And up until last October, 2009, I had 8 complete episodes in 2 years.
Nice.
What I considered complete episodes. I had these little things I called Random Noodle Updates, which was more like an audio blog of just something random and funny that happened. But I didn't really consider that a full episode. Now that's part of my regular episodes. But I was realizing 2 years, 8 episodes. Part of the problem was my pre-production and post-production. Back then, I entirely scripted my episodes.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
I went for a 15-minute episode, and it was completely scripted, which was awesome for search engines because my entire transcript was on the page. I posted it as blog. But it was a pain to write, to make funny, and edit, and re-edit. And then as I'm performing it, recording myself performing it to sound like I'm not just reading it. And then I'll like stumble over a word, so I have to go back. That's something I have to edit later. Or I realize, hey, I know a better way to say this, so I'll rewrite it and then re-say it. So it was a ton of pre-production and a ton of post-production. It would take me hours and hours, I think 6 hours, to release a 15-minute episode.
Wow. I used to, in the beginning, I tried to do the audio transcriptions. I bought program Max Speech Scribe, I think is what it was called. but I used it to actually, for my monologue episodes, transcode it, and it did a pretty decent job, but I just haven't caught up with it.
Nowadays,
it's time-consuming.
There's an app for that, There's that.
I know
there's that Dragon Naturally Speaking.
Yeah, some podcasters use the Dragon Naturally Speaking.
Yeah, it's the same kind of product.
Part of the show notes, they put a link to the full transcript.
But you might get some search engine hits that you may not have intended with.
There's some weird stuff.
With Dragon Naturally Speaking.
Yeah, once you train it, it's not too bad. But
you could feed it through Google Voice, and you have all sorts of fun with that.
Oh yeah, that's hilarious. You get voicemails, sent to, and usually it comes in the form of a text, and someone's looking over my shoulder as I'm reading, and they're going, "What? What?
The other reason I decided to go live, because previously I was just recording when I felt like it.
Commitment,
when I get around, could put aside 6 hours of my day or life across several months in order to release an episode. What I realized is, if this is really my flagship podcast, I'm doing a terrible job of podcasting. I was doing another podcast, started areyoujustwatching.com, about a movie podcast, and that has a co-host, and my co-host is pretty consistent, and we're consistent with releasing 2 episodes per month. It's not scheduled live, but still we're consistent. So I decided, I was looking at people like Cliff from GSPN or Twit or NLCast or all of these people who podcast live, and I'd love joining their shows. And I realized that I needed to step things up, and so I decided I would commit to podcast every week, unless there was something just beyond my control that wouldn't allow it. Podcast every week, podcast live, so that added the accountability that people would be expecting me to be podcasting at that time. Mm-hmm. And also, it would force me to not do so much pre-production and post-production. So I've tried to optimize my workflow so that I go just into the recorder, and then after my computer processes stuff, which takes about 30 minutes because it's an old computer, in 30 minutes, I have an MP3 ready to upload to the site. So doing that, committing to be live and scheduled, gave my show a huge boost. So that since November, after 2 years of having 8 complete episodes, since November, today, in June, I just recorded my 37th episode, which is like awesome to me, because I never thought I'd make it to 37 at the rate I was going.
It would have taken about, 42 years?
As far as the whole commitment thing, I realized I need to make a commitment to my audience to keep putting out episodes, and part of the way of doing that is I created a premium version and an iTunes App Store app that I advertised, hey, I'm going to give you episodes Monday, Wednesday, and Friday if you pay for this content in any way, shape, or form. And that forces me to do 3 episodes at that release time, and then that guarantees for the non-paid guys that you're going to get them Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So I think commitment is something that it's important, I think.
Yeah, one thing I've seen that is really great about podcasts is people are subscribed to it. They don't need a podcast every week or whatever. That, in theory, like you don't. It's not like a television show where you're scheduled 9 p.m. on Mondays. Mm-hmm. But people in general are creatures of habit, and they'll get a lot more out of it. And the shows that we've had that don't have a set schedule don't perform nearly as well as the shows we have that come out every Monday morning. Mm-hmm. Those shows, the growth is faster, and we don't drop off as nearly as quick after an episode. So
yeah, people will forget about you if you just stop for a couple of weeks or months.
Yeah, because you get on a Monday morning, you get in your car for your commute, you want to be able to hear the podcast that came out.
Yeah, and we're also on Stitcher and stuff, and that helps out a lot when the Stitcher episodes come out. You know, we get pretty good numbers on that, and it's usually people get in their car, they're going to work on Monday, and you know, if you're not released and out in Stitcher at that time, they'll listen to someone else.
Is that through?
Mention what Stitcher is.
Stitcher is an aggregator of podcasts online. So it's an app. You can either listen to it on the computer, or you can get an app for your iPhone or for your iPad, and it's basically radio that's stitched together podcasts. So you get in there, you say, I like this podcast, you select all the ones that you like, and then you go to your stream, and then you just select the top one, and it'll just go, when the first one's done, it'll go right to the next one.
Does it find podcasts, or do you have to submit your podcast to like Stitcher.com to do that?
You have to submit your podcast.
You do, okay.
They say that they tried to find you, but if they don't find you, you got to go to them.
Mm-hmm.
I went to them because we weren't on their show. It was back with the app show. I went to them. Yes, stitcher.com.
Yeah, I've got the app. I wasn't sure how you get in there.
It's how I consume all of my podcasts now. I just kind of get right on there and stream it. Usually I'll stream it when I'm wanting to fall asleep.
Nice.
So, cool. So, if you're on there, you definitely want to be out at a specific time every week so that people know when to get on there.
For audio, the commute time is real big.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if you can get out before they sync their iPod or iPhone in the morning, as long as you can get your show uploaded in your RSS feed by that time, it's good.
What I found is also awesome about doing a podcast live, like especially with having a chat room, is that the people in the chat room get to participate and get to drive the content of the episode. Like I'm starting this podcast about podcast. I already started it, the Audacity to Podcast, where I talk about podcasting and Audacity and the tools of podcasting. And having a chat room during that is great because if I mention something, people might ask a question that everyone else out there listening is probably wondering that same thing too, or it can help, or they might submit a question during the show that I didn't even think about. And so then they're driving the content and I'm answering their question. It's a great way to connect with the community. Now for me, I've seen about 5 to 10% of my audience or subscribers will come. What would you say it is for you guys for a live show?
It really depends on whether we start on time.
Yeah, I'd say maybe 1%.
Same here, 1%.
Okay.
It's pretty consistent.
It's probably because you guys have a lot more subscribers than I do.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Subscribers with better things to do than watch us live, I think. I don't think they like to.
So then I record into an H4n. Cliff, since he's not here, he's still talking somewhere, records into an Edirol R-09 HR. And the difference there is he records everything just in 2 channels. And he only does one post-processing thing through Adobe Audition. He runs the multi-band compressor, and he has some secret sauce recipe he uses for that. And I think I've matched his secret sauce with free Audacity. And
we have better secret sauce.
Yeah. Ours is spicier. And he uses pretty much the same... Well, yeah, he uses Heil PR40s, converts it to stereo, converts it to MP3 with Audition or iTunes, and uploads it pretty quickly after his shows too. And in fact, what he's usually doing is every Thursday for Cliff is live podcasting day for him. So Thursday from 8:30 in the morning until 5:30 in the evening, Cliff is live podcasting over at gspn.tv. Now that's not every single minute of live podcasting. He'll usually have a half hour or hour between each episode. But what he'll sometimes be doing is he'll have his computer processing one episode while he's recording the other to his Edirol. So what's awesome is by the end of the day, he has a virtual assistant too that I think takes care of some of this now too. By the end of the day, all he does is uploads these MP3s, and then his virtual assistant does the quick show note summaries or episode summaries and then posts those all for him. So he's got 8 episodes then posted in a day to different shows. And I'm not there yet. Mine are a little sporadic too.
Yeah.
You're getting there, Tim.
Yeah, it's hard because I want to do more podcasts, but I also, I think with the iPad show, I want to make sure there's a lot of content. And I think 3 times a week's good because more is better, I think, as long as it's quality.
Yeah, and and there's been a lot of like numbers that kind of go into how many times you should podcast a week. We only do 1 because we kind of watch the statistics, and that's kind of when our downloads start to even out. A lot of people do 2.
Now, are you saying 2 episodes for a single show?
2 episodes.
2 different shows?
A week or whatever.
Once a week.
For a single show.
Okay.
Yeah.
Part of the reason I did 3 is because I got addicted to podcasting once I started. I started with 1, and then I added the second one. And it was like, I have nothing to do until another. I felt I got bored, so I just did a 3rd. I mean, that's really I got addicted to it.
Well, now you guys, I'm not sure how many of you here that are with us got to see any of the live shows, but do you have any questions about the workflows that we make or how we turn around episodes quickly? And you're not going to have to get up and come to a microphone, so don't let that scare you. You can just ask the question from there, and we'll repeat it for the recording.
I'm just wondering what kind of live processing you put your mics through. Maybe you said different things.
What kind of live processing we put our podcast through? So what hardware or what stuff are we using?
I don't really do any live processing. I have my USB mic, goes directly into my Mac Mini, and that's what you get. After the show's finished and it's recorded, I'll send the show through Levelator, and then in GarageBand I'll do some edits, but I don't add any. I put on the no effects in GarageBand. I don't want them to try to change my voice at all.
Yeah, we use the board. We tweak for each of the guests, we tweak their little EQ settings, and then we have the compressor that takes out any background noise or squeaks in chairs or that kind of thing when it's quiet, and then keeps the signal so that it doesn't blow people's ears out or the recording. And then we do actually do a little bit of compression and normalization in Adobe Audition after the show.
And part of the way I do the live show is I record myself in one channel and then the other person in the separate channel, whether it be one or two people. And then I use Audacity to split that so I have two separate tracks for me, and so I can mute people if I need to.
And then what I do, I want to get a compressor limiter gate so that it can reduce how much post-processing I'm doing. But right now, I just pretty much I stick with the equalizer on the mixer, and like my sound effects and everything, that's all just mixed real-time, played from my computer into the mixer. So the most processing that I'm doing is just the equalizer for now, until I can afford a compressor. Good question.
Cool.
Any other questions? Yeah.
So far, how important do you think it is to be delivering live video to your podcast audience?
How important is it to deliver live video?
Video or live video? I mean, video in general?
How about both?
I don't do a bunch of live video, but I can say Leo Laporte's numbers, they've gone way up even with video adding, and he was afraid initially people would stop getting content in some way, but they've actually gone way up, and I think you guys have similar experiences.
Yeah, when we went to video, it was a massive upheaval. I mean, before we were doing all right, but when we put out the video, I mean, it shot right up there.
Yeah, and I was kind of surprised with Leo's numbers because we're seeing about the same numbers for the video, because our shows came out at about the same time in the video format, and we've seen about the same growth. So there's a lot of people out there looking for video. It's weird. Video's weird because the audio, well, at least the way I feel, audio, you get so much more out of it, and it's so much more useful. You can listen to it while you're doing other things, while you're in the car and everything. Video is much more of a sit down for this amount of time. You have to watch it, and that's your full thing you're doing. But so many more people download it. I don't know if it's more people download it and just don't watch it, but it's 10 times more people download our video than our audio. So
I wonder if that's maybe related to the fact that you have an iPad show, and so many of your listeners are interested in video because they've got the iPad to play it on.
We've seen the same thing with other shows. So,
okay.
I produce a couple shows for churches that do like their sermons, and it's the same thing. Okay. That one, it's only 5 times more, but it's still, there's much more emphasis put on video from download perspective.
And I think it'll only grow in importance over the next few years as Google TV and other services that bring internet video to television sets. That'll be huge, I think.
Yeah.
What's important, though, if you do video, is if you also release an audio format, unless you're just dedicated video, but if you also release an audio format, keep that in mind. Because one of the worst things you could do is talk about something in your video and say, this is just a really cool item, this little pad cleaning kit here. And you can see how soft it is. And see, it comes with this bottle. It's only about this big, and you can see how well it cleans. Or you start talking about things because you're seeing it, and you know some of viewers are seeing it. But you're leaving out the people who are listening, like people in the car, or what I often do to video podcasts, or like even when Cliff is live podcasting and he's got video, is I'm at work, so I'm working. I'm not watching the video while he's talking. I might, or like any of the other downloaded videos, I might glance over at them while they're playing. But I can't just sit down and watch a video podcast all the time. So I'm usually listening to something. So make sure that you get some good context in your audio recording too.
Yeah, that every once in a while we will suffer from that too, and we'll get a comment.
I've noticed that when I've listened. It's like, this is
you talked about this,
here.
and we've actually had a couple comments where people said, "Well, I unsubscribed from the video, unsubscribed from the audio and subscribed to the video because I can't tell what it is you guys are talking about at some point." So we've got to focus more on that too. It's one of those things to keep in mind because we're so used to doing an audio show. And then we do a video show, and then it's like it's a whole other world.
It's a tough problem to come across in both video focus with you get audio show too.
Yeah, and now that we have video, I can say, "Hey, look at this," And,
and even with the logistics of doing a show, you have to think video is 10 times more bandwidth on your server. Yeah. We do like 12 terabytes a month now, just from the video. So when we'd release an episode, it would crash our server. So we have to now use a dedicated video content delivery network.
We use Blip Type TV right now.
Yeah, we use Blip.
Okay. Yep. Good question. Yeah, what else?
Do you guys think you could talk to us for a moment about Google TV and how important you think it's going to be?
Talk about Google TV and how important we think it's going to be.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, we're on it like Hulu, and we're not on Hulu. We need to get on Hulu.
Yeah, we'd like to be on Hulu.
That would be nice.
We're on TiVo and Boxy and Roku right now, and that's okay. I mean, it goes up to like 10% of like.
Yeah, we're getting a lot more from the Roku.
Yeah, from Roku, it's like 10% of our viewers, and it's going to be good. And once Google TV gets on some stuff, it'll be interesting. It might be good.
Mm-hmm. I think it'll be a major uptake.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a really popular platform, and I think it's going to be really important for anybody with a video podcast to get on there as quick as you can.
Yeah, and I think Apple will probably revamp their own TV, whatever, and I think Google's going to be important because they're going to bring it to the masses. I think hopefully it might take a couple years. I think the version 1's not going to be the runaway hit, but version 3, version 4, they'll be huge, and I think more and more people will stop perhaps even paying for cable TV and just trying to get internet-based content on their television sets.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things is a lot of the TVs are now coming with built-in programs. Mm-hmm. So kind of trying to find what those are, if it's...
And that's what Google is trying to do, is make a platform that can be installed on TVs as a standard Android-based platform that will be a Google TV built into every TV. Or you might be able to get a set-top box like a Roku or a separate Google TV unit.
Right, and Boxy's on a few right now.
Yeah, and Box is coming out in November,
And stuff like with Netflix now available for streaming through
that's
like
killer.
The Nintendo Wii.
Right.
Yeah, that's killer.
And that is huge for them.
Yeah, I really wish that they had a podcast section on Netflix, man.
I really do
so
too.
on that.
I consumed 10 gigabytes worth of Netflix on my iPad just the first month because the 3G network's getting hammered from that. But anyways, Netflix they understand it. They have all the content on all the devices out there pretty much, and they remember where you stop playing it, and it just picks off on the other devices. It's just brilliant, and they get it. So.
Question. What else? Got time for
one thing when you're doing video though, it seems hard to go on all these different networks. But if you use something like Blip.tv or even TubeMogul, you can upload once and distribute to all the other places. So that helps, and they even helped us get into some of those other things. Like I think it was like there was one of the networks that we couldn't get into, and they got us in there. So
cool.
Hey, Dave and Steve, For post video stuff, how do you do the on screen iPad show, and what's kind of your post workflow for video?
For video, we try and do that all live too.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So we're trying to work on the lower thirds and that kind of stuff now. We don't really do that. We need to. But we just use QuickTime Pro to record the video input. Mm-hmm. And then we bought this little thing that has helped out a ton. It's an Elgato H.264 HD.
Oh, I've got one of those. Those are awesome.
It took when we were editing the show and mixing in things, it was taking 20 hours to encode it. And it cut that down to an hour.
Wow.
So.
Yeah, I've been working on some DVD projects for my dad, and several months worth of encoding have been finished in a couple of weeks. They're awesome.
One of the other things that you could look at is Ustream Producer is a downloadable application that you can use when you broadcast to Ustream. And their program does let you switch between a webcam. The free version of their program lets you switch between a camera or switch between multiple cameras and your own screen. Mm-hmm. But it can't do picture-in-picture. It can't do like a co-host feature. This is the free version I'm talking about. And it has some other limitations, like Ustream Producer doesn't let you put text on the screen or lower thirds, whereas the Ustream Broadcast Console, the web-based thing, does. Yeah. But it's kind of a give and take sort of thing.
And the hard thing about a lot of these things is, well, with Ustream Producer, we use that for quite a while, and it doesn't record to your hard drive.
Oh, yeah.
So you can't do a higher quality recording. You'd have to download it then from Ustream, and it's all nasty video. So
you have your video feed going to QuickTime as well as Ustream through a mixer? Is that how it's all done?
Two separate computers.
Okay.
The analog to digital converter box that we have has two FireWire ports on it. So one goes to the recording and one goes to a Ustream computer.
Okay.
All right. Any closing thoughts? Mention your website.
Thoughtless. Yeah, we're at the iPad or at iPadShow.com, not at the iPadShow.com. Someone snaked that from us, and they're sitting on it. But yeah, we're at iPadShow.com, and again, that's every Sunday at 3:30 is when we do our live show, and then Dave usually gets it out within the next day.
Yes, by the next morning.
Tim,
and I'm at thepossibilitiesnetwork.com.
And you record what times during the week?
I record Sunday night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I also release shows for the free feed Thursday and Saturday morning around midnight. They're out.
Cool. You know, you could abbreviate it to like TP Network.
I know. I need to do that.
The Toilet Paper Network.
But yeah, there's some other podcasts on there. Let's see.
TPN.
The other the Possibilities podcast was I used to do 2 podcasts a day in Success, and kind of an Inspiration a Day, so that's kind of an immersion of them. And there's a couple other podcasts on there, but the iPad one's the most it's not as dead as the other ones right now.
Cool. And my shows, I've got multiple domains right now, but they're all going to be in part of this new thing I'm starting, Noodle Mix Network. So it's Noodle.mx is my new site. And here at PodCamp Ohio, the internet hates me in that all of my sites are not accessible. Not just because of the .mx. It's
what kind of sites?
I think your hosting provider hates you.
Yes. Then I contacted them and they said, no, there's no problem. And I did that thing down for everyone or just me.com. And it said, it's just you. Well, now it says, nope, it's not just you. So I got to find a new host. You're welcome to suggest anyone you want to.
I can suggest a couple not to use.
Okay, I can
Ones
too.
Ones that we've crashed.
So thank you very much for joining us. You can check us out. Oh, Twitter names. I'm twitter.com/the Noodle.
I'm twitter.com/audio collective.
I am TCHATEN.
And I am S. Bostador. It's SBOSTEDOR.
Is that Spanish? Bostador.
Sure. So, if that sounds makes me sound more exotic, it's Spanish.
Yeah.
So check us out online, subscribe to us, follow us, stalk us, come visit our grandchildren someday.
Oh.
Email us, we'll answer questions.
Yeah, and
I'm sure they'll appreciate
and all of that. And join the live shows if you can. Thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you again, we hope, on the internet. Bye.
Cool. Yeah.
Now, I hope you found this conversation useful, and maybe your head is exploding right now from all of these technologies and all of these prices. But do remember, just because this is the way that the iPad Possibilities Show, the iPad Show, or Cliff Ravenscraft with all of his shows at gspn.tv, or even I do these things, just because we get this technology, buy it for all of this, doesn't mean you have to have all the same expensive technology in order to podcast live. You can podcast live with much cheaper equipment. For that, I want to refer you to episode 3, where I talked about the bare minimums for podcasting, and just combine that a little bit with what you've heard here in episode 4, and you'll be good. So if you want to get all of the links that were mentioned here in the episode, go to the audacitypodcast.com/4, the number 4. And make sure that you subscribe to all of the wonderful shows that were mentioned. You've got the shows over at gspn.tv. You've got my show, The Ramen Noodle. Also my other show, Are You Just Watching? Which each of those are at their domains, theramennoodle.com and areyoujustwatching.com. Also subscribe to the iPad show and the iPad Possibilities show. And you can get some really awesome stuff. And if you want to give me an iPad, I would definitely appreciate it. If you've got any questions or feedback, send them to feedback@noodle.mx or call in to the live listener line. Well, not live, voicemail line. I'm thinking live too much right now. That number is 859-353-4332. Follow me on twitter.com/theramennoodle. Now go podcast successfully. Thanks for listening.